"Oh, come on. You really think anyone in this room would understand your joke?" The words cut sharper than the crystal glasses clinking under the warm chandeliers of the Veritas Lounge in San Francisco, slicing through the polite hum of wealthy conversations. Jazz floated faintly in the background, a soft trumpet echoing like a ghost, but every eye in the room flickered toward the center where Logan Pierce, Billionaire CEO, leaned back with a smirk that suggested he owned not just the table, but the world beyond it. Maya Johnson, a 24-year-old black waitress, stood quietly near table 7, her simple black uniform crisp, her ponytail tight, shoes polished to a muted shine. She was not supposed to be the center of attention, yet she observed everything. The twitch of Logan's eyebrow, the subtle glance of his board members, the smirk that barely concealed his contempt. The room smelled of aged bourbon, roasted lamb, and fresh linen, a combination that spoke of wealth but also expectation. Maya's hands rested lightly on a tray, fingertips brushing the edges, not because she needed to hold it, but because she was present, aware, calculating. She had grown used to the invisible gaze, the patronizing nods, the subtle dismissal of her presence. But tonight there was a shift in the air, a tension that even the golden light could not soften. Logan's laugh erupted again, sharp and practiced, and the room instinctively flinched, forks paused midair, champagne glasses trembling as if the clink of crystal could be muted. Maya's almond-shaped eyes caught every flicker of reaction, not with fear, but with the quiet precision of someone who had learned to read the room without being noticed. She didn't smile, didn't frown. She simply watched, a subtle ripple of understanding crossing her face as Logan leaned closer to one of his partners, delivering another quip that landed like a pebble on still water. The other servers shuffled, cautious, invisible, but Maya's stance was firm, her shoulders squared, her gaze unwavering. She had spent her life learning to navigate spaces where power assumed it was untouchable, and now she stood at the very epicenter of that assumption. The light caught the shine of her watch, the polished floor beneath reflecting a pattern that seemed almost cinematic, a stage set for observation rather than performance. Logan, sensing the unspoken challenge in her silence, arched an eyebrow and tilted his head, his grin faltering for the first time as he noticed her eyes meeting his, steady and discerning, a quiet defiance wrapped in poise. The music continued, but the tempo felt different, as if the jazz had shifted to follow her heartbeat, a rhythm unnoticed by the rest but palpable to those attuned. Maya's mind raced not in panic, but in strategy, cataloging every angle, every subtle expression, the way power was wielded and assumed. And then, with a slight exhale that no one else in the room could hear, she let herself react, not with words, not with indignation, but with a quiet, knowing laugh that was soft, measured, yet carried an authority that the room immediately recognized. Heads turned, eyes widened, and Logan's smirk wavered, the laugh he expected to echo back in agreement now hanging suspended, unanswered, challenged. The room froze, the wealthy elite suddenly aware that the joke had not landed as intended, that someone who had been presumed silent and compliant had instead reclaimed the space with a simple, powerful human response. In that moment, Maya Johnson's presence shifted the balance of perception, a reminder that dignity and insight could not be overshadowed by title or fortune, and that courage, even in the form of a subtle laugh, could rewrite the unspoken rules of the room. Every subtle gesture, the clink of a glass, the flicker of a candlelight, became a part of the tableau, highlighting not just the opulence surrounding them, but the stark contrast of true authority revealed in unexpected places. And as Logan's eyes briefly widened, registering surprise and perhaps a trace of respect, Maya's laughter lingered, a quiet but undeniable assertion that power does not only reside in wealth or status, it resides wherever one dares to claim it. The room remained suspended in a delicate stillness after Maya Johnson's subtle laughter, a ripple moving through the crowd like the quiet shiver of wind. Across a calm lake, she did not step forward, did not raise her voice, yet every motion she made was purposeful, deliberate, a study in calm confidence. The soft glow of the chandeliers highlighted the gentle slope of her shoulders and the way her hands rested lightly on the edges of the tray, ready but never imposing. Logan Pierce shifted in his seat, the smirk he had worn so effortlessly now faltering into an expression that revealed the first cracks of uncertainty. Around them, the wealthy guests whispered among themselves, forks clinking softly against plates, the previously fluid rhythm of the jazz band now interrupted by a collective tension, as though the entire space was holding its breath. Maya's eyes did not waver, tracing the subtle gestures of Logan's associates, the way they leaned slightly away from him, the almost imperceptible exchange of glances that betrayed their growing awareness that the balance of authority had shifted, if only for a moment. She had learned to read power in the quiet, in the spaces between words, and in the pauses that most overlooked. Her mind cataloged every nuance, every inflection, every glance. As if the entire room were a puzzle she was quietly solving while remaining invisible to those who assumed her presence was insignificant. Logan cleared his throat, attempting to regain control, his voice smooth but carrying a tension that had not been there before. He made another jest, a carefully crafted remark meant to reclaim dominance, yet it landed flat, the room no longer responding as he intended. Maya's response was not immediate. She allowed a pause, the silence stretching, drawing attention to the subtle strength of her presence, a reminder that authority was not a function of wealth alone. The clinking of glassware, the soft hum of conversations, and the gentle swell of the jazz orchestra created a backdrop that contrasted sharply with the quiet intensity radiating from her. Each guest's attention flickered between her and Logan, noticing the transformation of energy, the way a single person, previously underestimated, could command the room with nothing more than poise and clarity. Maya's laugh had been a signal, a key that unlocked the perception of her intellect and dignity. And now the room adjusted subconsciously to her timing, her posture, the even cadence of her breathing, all the unspoken indicators of confidence that she had cultivated over years of navigating spaces that demanded invisibility as a condition of survival. Logan's hands tightened around the stem of his glass, the reflection of candlelight catching briefly in his eyes, revealing a flicker of respect he had not anticipated. He attempted to redirect the conversation toward business, a familiar territory where he expected to exert influence. Yet even in that domain, his words were met with the subtle but palpable weight of Maya's presence. The staff continued their duties, aware now that their colleague had become a focal point of attention, and even the most jaded guests could not ignore the elegance and intelligence she projected with every measured movement. Outside, the evening air settled gently over the cityscape visible through the towering windows, the lights of San Francisco casting a soft glow across the marble floors and polished surfaces, lending the scene a cinematic quality that amplified the contrast between wealth and true human presence. Maya's observation continued, noting every shift in body language, every subtle adjustment of a tie, every microexpression that revealed unspoken hierarchy, and she responded internally with a quiet assurance, knowing that her measured reactions had already begun to recalibrate the dynamics at play. Logan, realizing that the room's focus had shifted, paused mid-gesture, a momentary lapse in the confidence that had always defined him, and the guests sensed it, a collective understanding that the evening would unfold differently than any prior expectation. The subtle sound of a champagne cork popping in the background, the flicker of candlelight across the polished surfaces, and the gentle murmur of conversation became part of the tapestry in which Maya's quiet authority was woven, an invisible thread connecting perception to power, and reinforcing the lesson that presence and composure could challenge assumptions, reshape interactions, and quietly redefine influence in a room accustomed to deference. As the evening progressed, Maya Johnson moved with the precision of someone who had mastered invisibility and presence simultaneously, gliding between tables with a tray held lightly in her hands, every step deliberate yet unobtrusive. The soft hum of conversation, the clink of crystal, and the subdued strains of the live jazz quartet created an atmosphere thick with expectation, every sound accentuating the subtle drama unfolding at the center of the room. Logan Pierce, still seated with a slight furrow in his brow, observed her with a mixture of curiosity and unease, recognizing for the first time that the energy in the room was no longer dictated solely by his presence. Maya's eyes scanned the faces around her, noting the micro-expressions of the guests, the way their postures shifted imperceptibly toward respect, and the almost imperceptible relaxation of shoulders that had been rigid with anticipation. She did not speak. She did not act beyond her duties, yet the room had shifted, an invisible pivot turning the authority of the evening toward her calm, assured presence. The polished marble floors reflected the gentle glow of chandeliers, and the soft ambient light highlighted the contrast between opulence and quiet command, the subtle difference between wealth and character. Maya's attention returned to Logan as he attempted to steer the conversation back to his familiar territory of business and influence, but his words, carefully measured and sharp, no longer carried the same weight. The guests, sensing the change, began to exchange glances that conveyed an unspoken recognition that the dynamics had shifted. Even his closest associates, those who had once mirrored his confidence, now leaned slightly forward, intrigued by the understated authority emanating from the waitress who had been overlooked for so long. Maya carried on her work with meticulous care, arranging glasses and refilling plates, each gesture deliberate and full of purpose, yet entirely graceful. Her posture, straight and confident, conveyed a message that was not lost on anyone paying attention. Control and respect are earned, not commanded. Logan's gaze followed her, noting the composed manner in which she navigated the space, a silent testament to her intelligence and self-possession, a stark contrast to the forced bravado he had relied upon to command attention in rooms just like this. The evening air outside the floor-to-ceiling windows carried the faint scent of the bay, mixing subtly with the aroma of roasted meats and fresh bread within, a sensory detail that grounded the scene in reality, while the psychological undercurrents of the room heightened with every passing moment. Maya's quiet observations, the slight tilt of her head, the almost imperceptible nod as she noticed a guest's misstep or an unspoken tension between Logan and another executive, communicated volumes without a single word spoken. In this suspended space, her presence redefined the parameters of authority. It was not wealth that dictated attention, but the clarity of perception, the quiet strength of character, and the courage to exist fully in a room that had underestimated her. Logan adjusted slightly in his chair, a subtle acknowledgement that his assumed dominance was no longer unchallenged, and the guests sensed it immediately, the ambient tension shifting toward a collective awareness of the power inherent in dignity and poise. Maya continued to navigate the tables with fluid precision, her movements a choreography of composure and attentiveness, each step reinforcing her unspoken influence, while the ambient sounds, the faint rustle of napkins, the gentle tapping of silverware against china, the soft exhale of a guest impressed by her calm, served as an unintentional soundtrack to the quiet revolution she was leading. And as the evening stretched, the small yet profound impact of her presence became increasingly clear. A single individual, confident in their own competence and humanity, could subtly, irrevocably alter the balance of perception, reminding everyone that true influence does not rely on titles, money, or social standing, but on the integrity and intelligence one brings to every interaction, no matter how seemingly ordinary. The soft murmur of conversation continued to weave through the Veritas lounge, but the focus had subtly shifted, gravity quietly pulling toward Maya Johnson. She carried a tray with effortless grace, her movements precise and measured, but every step seemed amplified by the awareness that she now held the room's attention without even trying. Logan Pierce, seated with a slowly straightening posture, observed her keenly, sensing that his effortless dominance was being quietly questioned. The subtle flicker of candlelight along the polished mahogany tables highlighted the contrast between the glittering wealth around them and the understated command Maya exuded with nothing more than presence and poise. Every guest, consciously or unconsciously, began to notice the slight tilt of her head, the way her eyes swept the room, the minimal yet deliberate gestures that communicated control without arrogance. It was as if the air itself had shifted. The room, previously filled with polite acquiescence, now hummed with the quiet tension of recognition. Maya had mastered the art of observation, cataloging every subtle movement, every microexpression, every unspoken signal that carried more weight than words ever could. She noticed Logan's associates, their subtle glances and half-smiles betraying curiosity and a dawning respect they did not yet articulate. Outside the large windows, the city lights of San Francisco glimmered softly against the night sky, a serene backdrop that contrasted with the concentrated energy within. The faint aroma of roasted meats, fresh herbs, and warm bread mixed with the crisp scent of polished wood and sparkling glassware, grounding the opulence of the room in tangible detail that seemed almost cinematic. Maya's attention returned briefly to Logan, who shifted slightly in his chair, an almost imperceptible sign that he felt the balance of perception slipping from his control. She remained composed, allowing a measured pause in her actions to accentuate the quiet power she projected. The faint notes of the jazz quartet underscored the scene, each subtle rise and fall of the trumpet reflecting the tension and release in the room as Maya navigated the space. Guests whispered softly to one another, sensing the shift. But unsure of its source, their curiosity piqued by the understated yet undeniable authority she radiated. Each refilled glass, adjusted plate, and careful placement of cutlery served as silent choreography, emphasizing competence, intelligence, and calm mastery over her environment. Logan's expression softened momentarily, a fleeting acknowledgement that he was witnessing a force of composure and intellect that he had not anticipated, and the room's attention followed his gaze, solidifying Maya's subtle dominance. She continued her movements with a quiet rhythm, a sequence of fluid, thoughtful actions that conveyed as much as words ever could, transforming a simple act of service into a display of presence that commanded respect. Even the staff, previously accustomed to remaining in the shadows, noticed her, the subtle confidence she exhibited silently, setting a new standard for how presence and poise could alter perceptions in spaces governed by wealth and expectation. Each detail of her observation, each precise action, each gentle but deliberate motion contributed to an invisible yet unmistakable narrative. Authority is not conferred by title or status. It is claimed through awareness, intellect, and quiet courage. Logan's hands tightened briefly on his glass, a subtle sign of recalibration, and the other guests, sensing the nuanced power shift, leaned slightly, attuned to the silent dynamics unfolding before them. The interplay of light, sound, scent, and the measured cadence of her movements created a tableau in which Maya's understated authority was the focal point, demonstrating that influence, when exercised with composure and insight, could command attention, reshape perception, and quietly, irrevocably redefine the energy of the room, leaving a lasting impression that would echo far beyond the confines of that elegant evening. Maya Johnson paused briefly at the end of a polished mahogany table, her gaze sweeping the room once more, not out of vanity, but out of a keen awareness of the subtle power she now held over attention and perception. The soft glow from the overhead chandeliers caught the sheen of her hair and the crispness of her uniform, reflecting a disciplined elegance that seemed to command respect without a single word. Logan Pierce, still seated with a carefully maintained posture, could no longer rely on his usual aura of authority to dominate the room. The confident, measured presence of Maya had quietly recalibrated the hierarchy of influence in the space. Guests shifted in their seats, subconsciously adjusting their focus, noting the way her movements conveyed certainty, grace, and intelligence. The light shimmered on crystal wine glasses and polished silverware, accentuating the contrast between opulence and the understated command that Maya radiated. Every step she took was deliberate, yet seemingly effortless, a choreography of attentiveness that reinforced the quiet authority she now held. The soft strains of the jazz quartet seemed to bend around her presence, subtle swells and pauses mirroring the ebb and flow of attention in the room. Logan's associates exchanged glances, recognizing the subtle shift in energy, their confidence in his invincibility momentarily unsettled by the realization that influence could emerge from places previously considered negligible. Maya adjusted a glass on the tray with a fluid motion, her eyes briefly meeting those of a guest who had initially dismissed her, and in that moment, the weight of acknowledgement passed silently between them, a recognition of competence and composure that was impossible to ignore. Outside, the city lights of San Francisco cast a soft, ambient glow through the expansive windows, the reflection of the skyline creating a mirrored effect on the polished marble floors, grounding the scene in tangible reality while the psychological dynamics continued to evolve. Maya's observation was precise, noting every slight adjustment of a cuff, every subtle expression, every whispered exchange, cataloging the nuances of behavior as if conducting a silent symphony of perception. Logan attempted to redirect the conversation with practiced confidence, but his words no longer carried the same authority. The room responded differently, the previous dynamic disrupted by Maya's understated command. Each interaction she facilitated, each gentle adjustment of a chair or plate, conveyed a quiet mastery of environment and social awareness, transforming simple service into a demonstration of presence and influence. The soft scent of roasted meats and fresh herbs mingled with polished wood and the faint aroma of candle wax, creating an immersive atmosphere that enhanced the intensity of subtle power shifts. Guests began to lean slightly forward, captivated by the interplay between the billionaire accustomed to unquestioned control and the young woman whose quiet strength redefined the boundaries of attention and respect. Every subtle glance, every microexpression, every careful movement Maya made reinforced a silent narrative. Influence is not solely the domain of title or wealth, but resides in the clarity of observation, the steadiness of presence, and the courage to exist fully, unapologetically, in a room where assumptions of hierarchy have been challenged. Logan's gaze lingered on her, a mixture of intrigue and acknowledgement passing through his eyes as the dynamics he had always relied upon shifted in real time, and the rest of the room could feel it, a collective awareness that the evening had been quietly redefined by composure, intelligence, and the understated power of one determined individual navigating a space with skill, dignity, and unwavering confidence. Every movement of Maya, from the tilt of her head to the careful placement of a tray, contributed to a silent demonstration of authority that left an indelible impression, a reminder that true power manifests not in wealth or position, but in the way one commands presence, earns attention, and reshapes perception without a word spoken beyond the natural cadence of poise and deliberate action. Maya Johnson finally reached the edge of the lounge, her tray balanced effortlessly, yet she did not pause, did not signal for attention, her eyes continually scanning the room with quiet vigilance. The low murmur of conversations had settled into a hushed awareness, an unspoken acknowledgement that the room's dynamics had shifted subtly but unmistakably. Logan Pierce adjusted the cuff of his shirt, a brief glance toward Maya, betraying a spark of both surprise and intrigue, a recognition that the composure and subtle authority she projected were not to be dismissed. The ambient lighting of the chandeliers caught the glint of glass and polished silver, highlighting the contrast between the glittering surroundings and the understated power that emanated from her calm, deliberate movements. Every careful placement of a wine glass, every adjustment of a napkin, and every measured step served as a testament to her presence, a silent demonstration that competence and awareness commanded far more attention than wealth or title alone. The jazz ensemble continued, the gentle piano and saxophone notes creating a soft, undulating backdrop that accentuated the tension and subtle authority at play, each note carrying a rhythm that mirrored the pulse of the room's newfound attentiveness. Guests shifted slightly in their seats, exchanging quiet glances, some leaning forward imperceptibly, intrigued by the unexpected elegance and confidence of the young waitress who had quietly become the focal point of the evening. Maya's gaze, calm yet penetrating, flicked briefly toward Logan, noting the slight tightening of his jaw, the subtle narrowing of his eyes, indicators that he understood, in a moment of silent acknowledgement, that influence could emerge from places previously overlooked. She allowed herself a fraction of a smile, measured and composed, signaling nothing more than quiet assurance. Yet the effect was magnified by the attention of the room, each observer catching the nuance of her poise and interpreting it through their own awareness. The soft scent of roasted lamb, fresh herbs, and warm bread mingled with the polished wood and faint aroma of candle wax, grounding the opulence of the scene while reinforcing the tangible reality of the subtle power play unfolding. Logan attempted another shift in tone, directing a comment toward a nearby guest, yet his words carried a weight slightly diminished, tempered by the awareness that Maya's calm intelligence had altered perception, that the subtle authority of her presence was redefining expectations in the room. The staff, previously invisible, now carried themselves with heightened awareness, recognizing the quiet mastery Maya exhibited, the way she navigated complex social dynamics without a single misstep, and the way her measured actions created an aura of command without arrogance. Each gentle motion, every glance, every pause in her workflow served as a narrative of influence, a demonstration that power is not only about wealth or position, but about clarity, composure, and the ability to affect perception through presence alone. The room itself seemed to respond to her rhythm. The clink of glasses, the soft scraping of chairs, the subtle shifting of bodies, all aligned with the quiet authority she projected, creating a tableau in which the invisible became undeniably central. Logan's expression softened briefly, a fleeting admission that he had not anticipated this form of influence, and the guests, sensing the shift, continued to adjust their attention, drawn not to the display of wealth but to the precise, intelligent presence that Maya embodied. Outside, the twinkling city lights of San Francisco glimmered against the night sky, reflecting on the marble floors and polished surfaces, grounding the elegance of the evening in reality, while inside, the subtle redefinition of hierarchy continued, orchestrated through careful observation, composure, and the understated power of a young woman fully aware of her own strength and ability to command attention without confrontation, demonstrating that true authority can manifest quietly, deliberately, and undeniably in the midst of opulence and expectation. Maya Johnson approached the final table of the evening with the same measured calm she had displayed throughout the night, her eyes briefly scanning the polished silverware and crystal glasses before settling on the subtle expressions of the guests seated there. Each face reflected curiosity, admiration, and an unspoken acknowledgement of the quiet authority she had projected from the moment she entered the room. Logan Pierce remained seated, a trace of contemplation in his eyes, the confident smirk that had defined his presence now tempered by a new understanding of influence that was neither loud nor ostentatious. The soft glow of the chandeliers highlighted the sheen of her hair and the crisp folds of her uniform, casting reflections across the polished marble floors and emphasizing the contrast between the glittering surroundings and the understated strength she carried with every movement. Maya's hands rested lightly on the edges of the tray as she adjusted a glass, the gesture deliberate, precise, and observed by all who could perceive subtlety. The gentle strains of the jazz quartet filled the room, each note carrying through the atmosphere in perfect harmony with the measured rhythm of her steps, reinforcing the sense that composure and attention could quietly command a room. Guests whispered in hushed tones, exchanging glances that conveyed recognition of her skill, her intelligence, and the elegance with which she navigated a space previously assumed to be governed solely by wealth and status. Logan's associates began to lean slightly forward, captivated by her presence, the shift in energy undeniable even to the most practiced observers, as the subtle recalibration of authority unfolded imperceptibly but decisively. Maya's gaze swept the room with gentle awareness, noting the tilt of a head, a brief raising of an eyebrow, the faint catch in the breath of those now attentive to her every movement, all without a single word spoken beyond the soft hum of the background music. The scent of roasted lamb, freshly baked bread, and warm herbs mingled with the polished wood and candle wax, grounding the opulent setting while highlighting the tangible reality of the subtle power dynamics in play. Each deliberate placement of a napkin, every fluid step, every measured motion conveyed mastery and presence, transforming routine service into an exhibition of composure and influence that commanded respect. Logan's eyes met hers briefly, a silent exchange acknowledging the unexpected authority she now held, and the guests, sensing the nuance, continued to adjust their attention, captivated by the quiet intelligence and strength embodied in her actions. The reflections of city lights through the expansive windows added a luminous backdrop, the soft glimmer reinforcing the atmosphere of elegance and control, while the interpersonal currents in the room subtly shifted to reflect the impact of her presence. Maya's awareness of each micro-interaction, each subtle motion of hands, every glance, and every slight expression became a symphony of perception that reinforced her influence without the need for confrontation or overt display. Even the staff, previously accustomed to fading into the background, noted her confidence, her unspoken mastery of the environment, and the way her calm decisiveness altered the perception of power in the space. Every subtle movement, every careful adjustment, and the unspoken grace with which she carried herself communicated the undeniable lesson that influence is not granted by wealth or title, but emerges from presence, intelligence, and the quiet courage to command attention without force. Logan's posture relaxed slightly, an acknowledgement of the shift in perception, while the collective awareness of the room had been irrevocably recalibrated by Maya's composed authority. The interplay of light, sound, scent, and precise movement created a tableau in which her presence was central, demonstrating that dignity, insight, and quiet confidence can quietly redefine the hierarchy of influence, leaving an indelible impression that resonates far beyond a single evening and a single room, proving that true power is as much about perception, poise, and intelligence as it is about wealth or status. Maya Johnson slowly stepped back toward the service area, her movements smooth and deliberate, each action measured as if she were conducting a silent symphony of attention and perception throughout the room. The subtle clatter of fine china and silverware seemed to harmonize with the gentle swell of the jazz quartet, creating a cadence that mirrored the quiet authority she now radiated. Logan Pierce adjusted in his seat, his expression thoughtful, the previously unwavering confidence tempered by the realization that influence could be wielded without force, through presence, awareness, and intelligence alone. Every guest in the room seemed to lean imperceptibly toward her, drawn by the elegance and precision of her movements, the subtle confidence that had become the focal point of the evening. The glow of the chandeliers cast long, soft reflections across the polished marble floors, highlighting the contrast between the ornate surroundings and the understated power she commanded with poise and attention to detail. Maya's eyes flicked from table to table, noting the tiny shifts in posture, the slight turns of heads, the subtle indications of respect that had replaced the previous deference to wealth and status. Each refilled glass, each adjusted napkin, each careful placement of a plate reinforced her presence, demonstrating a mastery of environment and social nuance that captivated the room without a single word beyond her natural actions. Logan's associates exchanged quiet glances, recognition dawning in their expressions that the balance of perception had shifted, their previously unchallenged assumptions recalibrated by Maya's quiet strength and deliberate composure. The aroma of freshly baked bread, roasted vegetables, and fine herbs mingled with the polished wood and faint scent of candle wax, grounding the room in tangible reality, while the psychological and social currents shifted imperceptibly in her favor. Maya's movements remained effortless yet precise, each gesture reinforcing an invisible authority, a subtle orchestration of perception that drew attention and respect organically. The guests' whispered observations created a hum of acknowledgement that highlighted the contrast between the opulence surrounding them and the human presence that had quietly redefined the energy of the space. Logan's gaze followed her for a moment, an almost imperceptible nod of recognition passing across his features, acknowledging the subtle but undeniable mastery she exhibited in commanding attention, shifting perceptions, and influencing the atmosphere without confrontation. The soft twinkle of city lights from outside reflected across the expansive windows, adding an ambient shimmer that mirrored the quiet luminosity of her influence in the room. Maya continued her movement toward the rear, every step reinforcing the awareness that she had altered the dynamics of the evening, transforming a space once governed by assumed hierarchy into one measured by observation, composure, and presence. The gentle cadence of the jazz music, the quiet murmur of guests, and the soft ambient light combined with her deliberate, fluid actions to create an environment where influence and authority were redefined by human intelligence, awareness, and quiet confidence rather than title or wealth. Every microexpression, every subtle adjustment, and every intentional pause she executed communicated a powerful lesson. That perception, poise, and the courage to exist fully in any space could quietly, irrevocably redefine the social currents and leave a lasting impression that would resonate long after the evening ended, emphasizing that true authority is claimed through presence, clarity, and composure, not demanded by status alone. Maya Johnson finally reached the service entrance, her tray empty, but her presence commanding the space like an unspoken declaration. The guests, now fully aware of the subtle shift she had orchestrated, observed her with a mixture of admiration and curiosity, their earlier whispers fading into a quiet reverence for the composure she had displayed throughout the evening. Logan Pierce remained seated, his posture straightening in a contemplative acknowledgement that the rules he had always relied upon to command attention were no longer absolute, that influence could emerge from presence, intelligence, and quiet courage rather than wealth alone. The warm light of the chandeliers reflected off the polished marble floors, casting elongated patterns across the room and highlighting the elegance of the space. Yet the true focus was on the calm authority Maya radiated, an energy that had subtly realigned the dynamics of power without confrontation. Each step she had taken, each measured motion of her hands, each gentle adjustment of a plate or glass, had woven a silent narrative of competence and dignity, and the effect was now fully realized. A room once dominated by presumed authority now attuned to her awareness and poise. The soft strains of the jazz quartet played on, their music seeming to bend around her movements, emphasizing the rhythm of observation and control she had maintained throughout the evening. Guests shifted in their seats, leaning slightly, their attention drawn to the elegance and precision of her actions, recognizing that the balance of influence had been recalibrated without a single word of confrontation. Logan's eyes followed her briefly, a subtle acknowledgement of respect passing across his features, the first sign of understanding that authority can be claimed through presence and awareness alone. The aroma of roasted meats, fresh herbs, and warm bread mingled with the faint scent of polished wood and candle wax, providing a tangible layer of grounding to the opulent yet psychologically dynamic space. Staff members observed Maya as well, noting the quiet mastery with which she navigated the room, her composure setting a standard that subtly elevated the collective awareness and performance of everyone present. Each motion she executed, each glance she offered, and each pause she allowed became a lesson in unspoken influence, demonstrating that poise and intelligence carry weight far beyond social expectation or wealth. The soft glimmer of city lights through the expansive windows reflected against the room's polished surfaces, mirroring the illumination of Maya's quiet authority and the lasting impression it had created. Every guest present had now internalized the subtle lesson of the evening, that true influence is measured not by position or fortune, but by the clarity, courage, and composure one brings to every interaction. Maya's final steps toward the service area were as measured and graceful as her first, leaving behind an atmosphere transformed, a space in which respect and attention had been quietly, irrevocably recalibrated. The balance of power had shifted, not with noise or spectacle, but through the steady, deliberate presence of a young woman whose awareness and poise had redefined the room, proving that authority is not demanded, it is earned and embodied, leaving an indelible mark that would resonate in the minds of all who had witnessed the quiet demonstration of true, human-centered power.